Okay, so now we're back and our dough's kind of come together a little bit better. So now what we're going to do is shape the dough. Now before we start shaping, I just want to go over with you some pieces of equipment that'll help you out. If you have something thin, like maybe a dough scraper like this in your kitchen, or a long spatula, something that you can just basically cut the dough with. You can also use just a normal knife. You just have to be a lot more careful when you're using a knife as far as cutting dough, because dough gets a little bit sticky and you don't want to cut yourself. So if you're going to use a normal knife, just make sure that you are being as safe as possible when using it. But if you have something like a dough scraper or a spatula, that'll work as well. And as you can see, our dough's kind of grown a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to shape it into 4 individual balls. Now I have a little bit of water again. Once again, that can wet your hands. That way when you're shaping into dough balls, making it super easy to work with and kind of no stress in this process. The next thing that you're going to need is you're just going to need a sheet pan. If you don't have parchment paper, you can go to the store and get it. Really doesn't take long. You could even leave the dough sitting on the counter, obviously covered with the bowl again, for a little while longer if you wanted to run out and get it. If you don't want to use parchment paper, you can actually just use some of the semolina that we gave you. You'll want to sprinkle it on the bottom of the pan and make sure that you don't have it to stick to the bottom of the pan. It's going to be easier when you get it off later on. The parchment paper works great for that. It makes it a lot easier for you as you're going to scrape it later on and start to make pizza. Let's go ahead and start shaping some dough balls. That way you can see that process. First of all, just wet your hands a little bit, make sure it makes it easier for you to work with. And since you don't have a scale to weigh this out, realistically you could create 4 or even 6 smaller pizzas with it. Today we're just going to create 4 different dough balls. Roughly these should weigh between 265 to 270 grams. And that's going to create you a pretty decent sized pizza and easy to stretch, easy to work with. Now what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to take this dough and I want to just cut it directly in half. And if you notice, I'm pulling it away, so that way, if I were not to pull it away, it's just, if I just cut it in half and I leave it here, it's gonna start sticking back together. What I wanna do is each time that I cut, I wanna pull the piece away that I've cut. I wanna try and roughly create 4 of the same size dough balls. Now they don't have to be perfectly weighed out. If you have a kitchen scale and you want to set it to grams, once again, it's between 265, 270. So now let's talk about shaping these dough balls. I'm going to show you guys a technique that's the super simplest way to make a dough ball that'll look just like restaurant style without all of the fancy techniques that they use. There's tons of ways that they do to make dough balls. The easiest way is literally pick it up, flip it on the other side. Now remember, this is going to be the top, and then this is obviously the bottom. And you want to always keep the top, and the bottom, the bottom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just simply taking it, folding and tucking, folding and tucking, folding and tucking, folding and tucking, until I create basically a balloon out of the dough. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to press the dough together and seal that balloon. And now I've made a dough ball. And you can put that on your parchment paper and let that sit for later. Same thing, wet your hands a little bit. If it starts to get sticky, you're going to pick it up and you're just simply going to fold over, fold over, fold over, and continue to turn while you fold. That way you're kind of making the ball shape out of it. Now once again, once you get it all into the ball, you're going to simply just start to take the dough and crimp it up. Now, another way that you can do this is you can take it and inside of your hands, get your hands a little bit wet. You can simply fold it over and crimp the underneath. So you can fold it over and crimp, fold it over and crimp. And the goal is you want to create a smooth surface on top. So that way later on you'll have a nice even pizza dough when you have it for cooking. So once again, you kind of want to take these and same thing, I can just fold it in, 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 or I can go back and do the same technique from before. Really doesn't matter. If you notice, there's no real difference between any of these dough balls from the one that I did the other way to the ones that we have here. Once again, you just take it, and so now I have 4 roughly evenly sized dough balls. The next step, and what you're going to need for this, and I'm going to go grab it real quick, is some plastic wrap. And the plastic wrap is going to help you out. You're going to cover up the dough balls and you're going to let them rest. What you're going to do in this process is called proofing. The goal behind proofing your dough balls is you get them right to the point where they're ready to be cooked. What we're going to do is we're going to cover these up, and you can cover them up with plastic wrap and you can see this process. If you want to actually see it happen, you can take a damp towel and cover it up, and then you're going to let these proof up to the size that you want them when they're ready to be cooked. So that means that they're going to basically almost double in size and kind of almost touch each other. They're about, 2 fingers apart here roughly, and they'll almost actually touch one another. That will be the point where it's properly proofed and ready for you to actually stretch. See, right now with how it is, and the reason why we have all of these breaks and stops in the dough making process is so that way you can develop gluten, and also it makes your dough not so springy. Meaning that, when you're sitting there pressing and you're massaging your dough, it starts to get tense. And so you want to let it relax. And this is a part that will help it relax. So then when you're ready to stretch it into a pizza, it's going to be easy to work with, not going to have a whole bunch of challenge. What we're going to do here is we're going to cover it with plastic wrap, and you want to make sure that the pan that you use is a little bit deep. You don't necessarily want to have an all the way flat pan, because once again, dough's gonna rise, and you wanna make sure that the dough, when it rises, it doesn't basically flatten back again because you have your plastic wrap on too tight. So now we're just gonna cover it up. Another tip or trick, if you want it to not necessarily stick to the plastic wrap, even though that's not really gonna ruin your finished product, it's just more or less gonna ruin the look of the dough ball. You could take a little olive oil from your kitchen and just rub it on the top of the dough balls, and then the plastic wrap won't stick to the top. So if you wanted to take just a little bit of olive oil on your hands, I'll do that really quickly for you just to kind of give you that example. That way the dough balls don't have anything to stick to. Olive oil's not gonna hurt this process at all. I got this fancy sprayer, but you're just gonna kind of pat it on top, pat it on top. And all this is gonna do is just help it not stick. It's not gonna change the dough in any way. It's literally just gonna make sure that that plastic wrap doesn't stick. If you don't wanna put this plastic wrap on now, you can simply just put a kitchen towel. Make sure that you damp the kitchen towel before you put it over it. And you just simply cover this, and you're going to let them rest and proof up to the proper size. Once they're done proofing, that can be the point where you're going to cook, or you can decide that you want to block them. Now, blocking them means that you could cook them later. For example, if you wanted to do this process the day before and then cook the next day, you'd want to first let your dough balls proof up to the proper size, and then after that, you're going to put it into the fridge. If we put it into the fridge right now, they would begin to proof in a much slower process, but the overall end product that you're going to get when you're going to stretch your dough, everything like that, isn't gonna work out as well. So you wanna make sure you proof these on the counter, maybe for about 30 minutes to an hour. The goal is that they wanna puff up and become almost touching each other, if you will, in size. There is a thing called overproofing. Now, overproof dough, you're going to see lots and lots of big bubbles. It's gonna look like it's even harder to work with. So realistically, we just wanna get these to the point where they've grown a little bit, maybe doubled in size, and then we're going to block it and put it in the fridge. So if you're gonna cook then, meaning you're gonna start making pizzas as soon as you're done proofing, great, it's time to start your oven. It's time to get everything else together, all your condiments, all of that stuff. And as your dough proofs up, Then you're ready to start stretching, you're ready to start making pizza. Now we'll go over videos on how to make pizza, but let's say you're not ready yet, and maybe it's the middle of the day, and you're not gonna make pizza until tonight. No problem, you just let this proof up for about an hour. You wanna see your dough balls rise up a little bit and get a little bit closer to each other and almost maybe double in size. And then after that, you take the whole tray, you put it in the fridge, and you block it. Now you can do that for 24, 48 hours. After 48 hours, the dough is gonna probably overproof on its own. It's gonna be really hard to work with. Not saying that you can't save it, but we'll talk about those types of things in later videos. For now, let's just plan on making sure that we're ready to use this when it's time, and then we'll go over making, the dough afterwards. Hope this is informative here. Let us know if you have any questions, but we'll move on to the next video, which we're gonna show you how to stretch and how to actually work with the dough and make pizzas.